As you guys can tell from that intro, there's no surprise that I'm going to be talking about Lionel's new Pennsylvania Railroad S1 Duplex locomotive that was released in their 2020 Volume 2 catalog. I don't buy that many Lionel steam locomotives because they're kind of pricey. So when I do buy a steam engine, it has to really jump out at me when I'm looking at the catalogs that Lionel puts out. And of course, when I saw this locomotive, it definitely jumped out at me, and I knew I had to have it. I'm just going to briefly touch on the history of this locomotive. So it was built in Pennsylvania's Altoona shops and was completed in 1939. The reason why there was only one of this engine built was because the T1, which was another duplex that the Pennsylvania Railroad had, was being developed and built at the same time as the S1. So by the time they finished running building this engine, they focused more of their attention on the T1s. So no further S1s were built. So the engine ran in revenue service from December of 1940 until May of 1946. And this engine, because it was so unique, had good points and bad points to it. Some of the bad points were that it had a problem with wheel slippage, and that because of its length and weight, it had a limit. It was limited to a certain route. It only ran between Chicago and Crestline, Ohio, a 283-mile trip, because there was a Y where they could turn the engine around in Crestline, Ohio, and there was also a Y that they had that they used in Chicago to turn this engine around. But this engine had a lot of good points to it too. Researching the history on this engine, it ran an average of about 10,000 miles a month. To put that into perspective, the Pennsy were running their K4s between 6,000 and 8,000 miles a month. The engine proved to be an attractive, popular engine with the crew. They liked its speed, and they liked that it ran smoothly when it had those big 3-axle trailing truck behind the drivers, gave it a smooth ride. And this engine had a lot of power. It had over 76,000 pounds of tractive effort. So even though it had a short life and there was only one engine built, it was used extensively on the Pennsylvania Railroad. I wanted to release this video earlier, but I had some personal issues to deal with, and I didn't have time to take this engine out and make the video right when I got it. But when I did take it out, one thing that did happen, and another reason why it's taken me so long to make this video, was that when I took the engine out, I started running around the layout, and the engine would derail when it would go around the 072 curves. And I know a lot of you guys that have made the video on this engine, that they say that this engine, the minimum curve is 072, but it runs better on 084 and 096, which I definitely have to agree with that. And when running this engine, that's definitely true. But the engine would derail on entering the 072 curves, and I didn't think that was right. And what I found out was that the rear truck was binding. There was something stuck. When it would swing either left or right entering the curve, it would get stuck on something inside the engine, and it would throw the drivers off of the tracks, because the rear truck wasn't pivoting, swinging out, because it was getting caught. So I took this back to Charles Rowe, where I bought it, and I had the receipt, and they swapped it out for me. So this engine is actually my second S1. The problem, luckily, has been solved. As far as my personal thoughts on this locomotive, I just can't say enough about its design. I absolutely love its design. When I was waiting, I had to wait a year to get this, and I really was excited to get it. I absolutely love the Art Deco design. Even starting from the front, you've got the unique streamlined front of the boiler with the headlight protruding in the front, and the line striped front of the locomotive with the plaque in the front. I love that this engine has the side. They used the plates that would cover over part of the drivers, giving it that real unique design. Even the drivers themselves, I find that I like engines with bigger drivers. I think it's just they're more attractive. And this engine, had 84-inch drivers, and I love even the design on the spokes. They have little indentation lines on each spoke, which is really an attractive feature. And I like how the sides of the engine again cover over the drivers. And then you've got the the beautiful line striping that runs the whole length of the locomotive. The roof hatch slides open. It's got some nice crew figures on either side of the locomotive, and you've even got a flickering firebox, which is a nice effect. Then going back to the tender, what I really love about this and that design, that Art Deco design, I love how the sides of the tender cover over the wheels of the trucks, giving it that real sleek design. I just absolutely love that. And I love the lettering, that the Pennsylvania word that runs the whole length of the tender, and with the nice Pennsylvania Keystone logo in the middle, and the three-line striping continuing from the locomotive all the way to the rear. And the top of the tender, that's a real coal load up top. It's not molded in plastic. And then you've got some in the back behind that. The rear of it is actually all red, which is unique. And then you've got a couple of hatches that open, but there is nothing underneath them. They're just blank, but they do open. And in the back, you've got the nice ladder with the two marker lights. And of course, with Lionel's locomotives, you can change the classification lights from green to white, and you can also do that in the rear of the locomotive. You can change the lights from green to white. So I absolutely love this engine. My 844 was in the past was my most attractive engine. I love the look of the 844, but this now is my number one favorite as far as looks. It's just really a beautiful work of art, and Lionel really did a fabulous job recreating this locomotive. So the weight of this locomotive is 12 pounds 7 ounces, and the tender is 5 pounds 10 ounces, which gives it a hefty 18 pounds 1 ounce. So this is a pretty heavy locomotive. My favorite feature on this locomotive, I have to say, is the safety valve steam. It's pretty cool when you run it. Actually, if you run it slow, or if you have it sitting stationary, the safety valve steam will start to blow smoke. So it's a really cool feature. I'm sure you guys are aware, Lionel now comes with, you can change the horn/whistle of these engines, and this engine comes with 3 different horns and 2 whistle sounds. Now this engine, another unique feature about this engine is that it did not have a whistle, it had a horn. So I'm going to be running this engine with a horn, the sound of the horn, but I have to say that one of the whistle sounds that comes with this engine I absolutely love, but I won't run it with that whistle sound because it's not prototypical, as this engine again had a horn. Talking about the physics of this locomotive, I have the 3985, the 4664 Challenger, which I will be doing a video on that engine. I've had that for about 2 years now, and I love that engine. But that engine is articulated, and so that engine is a lot more forgiving when it goes around corners, and it's not quite as long as this locomotive, but this locomotive is not articulated. The drivers are fixed to the frame, so when it goes around corners, it really has to. You can tell that the drive wheels are stretching to get around those corners, and so this engine, I have to stress, if you're thinking about buying this locomotive, I can't stress it enough. This engine is not as forgiving as most locomotives because it's got that rigid frame. The only thing that pivots is the forward trucks and the rear trucks, and the 4 sets of drivers stay rigid to the frame. So make sure that if you plan on buying this locomotive, make sure that it can handle the curves, and make sure that you don't have track that's too uneven because it is rigid. I know the big discussion on this engine is its actual length. This thing is very, very long. And the way that I can compare it is with my 3985, the Challenger. Just to give you guys a comparison, and what I'll do is I'll break it down by the length of the engine and the length of the tender. So the S1, from the front of the engine to the rear of the tender, is 36 inches long. The length of my 3985 is 32 inches long. So this S1 is 4 inches longer than my 3985. And if you break down the S1, the locomotive is 20.5 inches in length, and the tender is 15.5 inches in length. The 3985 Challenger is 20 inches in length and 12 inches in length for the tender. So as you can see from those numbers, the S1 is only 1/2 inch longer than my 3985, the locomotive portion, but the tender on the S1 is 3.5 inches longer than the tender on the 3985. So what really gives this engine its length is a lot of it has to do with the length of the tender. The tender is very, very long. So I thought it would be good to show you guys the underside of this locomotive and how the wheels are arranged. Starting in the front, you've got the lead truck here, and it pivots. You can see how much it pivots here. There's a little bit of play back and forth. Then you've got the 2 sets of 4 drivers here. The middle drivers here are flangeless. You've got the 2 traction tires over here. These wheels here do not have traction tires, and these drivers are fixed to the frame. They don't rotate. And then you've got the 2 pickup rollers here. And then the rear truck in the back pivots like this. The rear truck is pretty big, pretty long. Here's the underside of the tender. You've got the infrared, other side of the infrared right here that sends the signal between the locomotive and the tender. You've got the 4 axle trucks. Each truck has a pickup roller, and they rotate like this. You've got the speaker here, and there's some underneath the tender, there's some detail right here. And of course the electrocoupler here. Now on to the best part, is the running session. So just to let you guys know, unfortunately I do not have any Pennsylvania Railroad passenger cars. This engine of course was a passenger locomotive, but I'll be running freight cars, which is not prototypical. Fortunately though, back in May I ordered from Atlas some heavyweight passenger cars to go with this. I didn't want to order the Lionel 21-inch passenger cars in the same Volume 2 catalog that came in the same catalog as this engine because I already have the 21-inch passenger cars in the Union Pacific colors, and I wanted to do something different. So these heavyweight passenger cars are actually MTH cars that Atlas purchased from the molds from MTH. So unfortunately, who knows when I'm going to be getting them. You never know with Atlas when you order something. It took me almost 2 years to get 2 Trinity hoppers that I had ordered from a train store. So you just never know when I'm going to get these cars, but I'm sure they'll look beautiful running behind this engine. So I'm going to be running this engine behind some freight cars.
This is the dispatcher. Get her set up running. Your train will be ready at 17:30. Over.
Yes, sir. We'll fire her up. Out.